For everybody listening here, usually we start off the conversation
Right.
with just a bunch of AI stuff, and we dive in.
We talked about cursor rules and cloud agents. I feel like it's kind of the same. It's like annoying to do those, but it's kind of like setting up the system to, get better code or whatever, right? You have to write the cursor rules. You have to write, the design the system, etc. So I wonder there'll be an atomic habits for like cursor rules or LLM prompts and stuff like that that come
Right.
out at some
Yeah.
point.
I'm curious because, like, if anybody that's listening doesn't know what these are, it's essentially just additional prompts that kind of guide the agent. So let's say you're writing code or you're doing something and you do something over and over again, but the coding agent just screws it up every time. You can just like give it a prompt and it'll save that prompt and give it like memory, like, hey, like, don't do this next time. And like forever, it'll always know, like, oh, don't do it this way or do something this way. And I wonder if it seems interesting to me that this is still a manual process. I get it. But like if you're writing code or you're doing something and I don't know, I feel like this could be something where you push code and you see like a decent amount of change, like, hey, like, should this be an addition to the cursor rules or the Claude agents file or something? But
Yeah.
maybe not. Maybe it's too not like a solvable problem because you just be like overloading context and it's like not good. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's a trade-off. But I mean, people who I feel like do it in a really well, like seem to have a system. Like one, I was listening to this podcast. Greg Eisenberg, he did one with Lee Robinson. Who
All right.
Lee used to be the VP of product at Vercel. He left. He just recently joined Cursor, and he's been doing, we've been talking about Cursor recently, and he shared his workflow for content. And I mean, it wasn't like crazy new, but what I really liked was he had a whole like rules file for his own writing, which was very interesting. I wish he had shared it, but he had these like LLM rules for writing where it was like basic stuff like, oh, don't use M dash, but even more nuanced, like, because there's like LLM got like the way LLM talk is like, it's not like X, it's like Y. Like, so he had these examples like, don't ever use like stuff like this, etc. And I
Right.
was like, oh wow, that's actually pretty cool.
Right.
Because now when you write like a tweet or a blog, you go through those rules, you have a really good first pass, and then you can edit it.
Totally. No, completely. I read an email from Every the other day too, and it was similar. It was talking about like creative writing and can LLMs like be good writers. And yeah, it's really interesting, and it applies to kind of what we're doing too at JellyPod. I mean, podcast and conversation is very
Right.
similar because modeling conversation in rules is hard, and you can't really do it, but you can definitely guide it in the right way. There's usually this long monologues and then there's like interruptions, there's banter, there's the pacing changes and all those certain elements. It's pretty interesting. Well,
Sure. Yeah.
but cool. I think let's jump into a few big news this week in the AI world, and then we'll get into some of the generative AI stuffs. Big news. We'll go through this really quickly. It seems like startups are getting acquired. Pretty interesting. Three big ones this week. OpenAI, they acquired StatSig. StatStig's like a A/B experimentation platform. Been around for a while. I think it was a $1.1 billion
Right.
acquisition. So cool. We'll see what happens there. I assume they're going to integrate with their evals product. So it's more
Yeah.
of like feedback, real-time feedback from users, make it much more easy to annotate traces in OpenAI so that you can like continuously improve your prompts and make your product better. It seems like that's probably what they're going to do with it, but we'll see. And then we got our friends over at OpenPipe. We know them, David and Kyle Corbett and the whole team over there. They just got acquired by CoreWeave, which was huge. So
Yeah,
congrats,
congrats.
guys. That was a big acquisition as well, people that we know personally. And then the browser company, Arc Browser, MDIA, got acquired by Atlassian. So the infamous parent company of Jira and Confluence and all the greatest designed programs in the world that everybody loves.
The best looking software in the world. Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be amazing
Yeah,
marriage.
yeah, yeah, man. So yeah, there's some updates of the acquisition space. We'll probably see some more ramping up. I wonder why everyone's acquiring. Everyone's coming back from summer break, maybe September.
Yeah. I mean, it's just both. We live in an area of this almost like a post-economic world for these people. It's like I feel like they just have capital to deploy, and they're just like, they're deploying it.
Right.
So why not? Hey, if anyone's interested in JollyPod, reach out. We'll talk. We no
Yeah.
promises.
Yeah, yeah, of course, yeah, we're
Yeah.
building some cool stuff. It's always interesting when we dig in. But yeah, so cool. Let's jump. So last week we talked about Nano Banana. I think this got a lot of
Right.
hype online. It's in Gemini now, so you can like generate an image in Gemini, and then it has like the banana icon, and so that's pretty cool. Even though Gemini, as a consumer product, I think doesn't get enough love from
Mhm.
everybody. It's not like on par with ChatGPT or even Claude's name recognition.
Right.
Maybe it is now with AI overviews. I don't know, but
Sneakily, it's like OES Studio is in the top 10 consumers apps in the world, which
right,
people don't understand. Like people like Google is very underrated. And actually, Google's macro news that happened was they had a ruling that went in their favor that where a
right.
judge
Okay.
was there were a lot of investors were scared that Google would be split up or they would be forced to sell Chrome. That did not happen. The judge basically ruled that they don't have to do it. It caused a huge uptick in their stock price. I think it's up to 30 now. From all the way down to like they were in the 170s. I think not to, um, uh, you know, uh, I think only a
Right.
few months back. So, yeah. So I mean, I think a lot of Google investors, myself included, we feel like we've been vindicated. I think Gemini has been slept on, and I think they're going to continue to be a leader in the space. Yeah, Gemini 3, I'm excited when it comes out. I think it's going to be amazing. And so, yeah.
Totally, totally, totally. I have to look at where my portfolio is. This is not investment advice,
Yeah.
anybody, but yeah, very bullish on Google, especially like if you've been in a Waymo before. Awesome, very cool. And this could be competition. I feel like this could be Tesla with Robotaxi, which I just saw had a wait list that anybody can apply to. Still skeptical on that.
Hmm.
A little scary on cameras only, but it'll get
Right.
there. I think. I
Yeah.
have faith. I have faith, but we'll see. But Waymos are sick. Um, I took one last night again. I take one all the time, and so
Yeah.
and they're
I mean,
coming to Seattle, so they'll be there soon.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think
You'll be
they're
gone.
rolling out to a bunch of places. They're ramping up pretty fast now, I think. So
Yeah, yeah.
excited and super nice. And so awesome stuff. Developments happening on that front with Google. But coming to we were talking about Nano Banana. I think Nano Banana, it's very interesting because of obviously the fine grained control the edits. But another thing which I played around with recently was that it can like create multiple images as well, either in one shot or afterwards.
Hmm.
It does suffer from mode collapse, which I think not enough people are talking about. Which we're still in the honeymoon phase of Nano Banana, but it could be because of the Flash model that's accompanies it, but it can get into this annoying phase where you ask it for an edit and it just gives back the same image over and over again. So either because of some copyright restriction or some censorship, or because the model is just not capable of understanding what you're trying to say.
Interesting.
So I tried this like interesting experiment where I gave it my image and I said age it 10 years. And it does like it's so annoying because it'll do a good job like from like the first couple of decades and then the last few decades, but in the middle it just doesn't do a good enough. It just gives me the same like I'm in my 30s and suddenly I be jumped to 60.
Right.
So
That's really interesting.
hopefully they fix that because I think there's some really interesting use cases and apps you can build using progressive editing on one image, like aging or just adding items progressively and then creating an animation, etc.
You know, what'd be very interesting. Maybe going off topic a little bit here, but like I know you play around with this stuff a lot, and you're really passionate about it, and it's really cool. I mean, this stuff that you're talking about, you just said, "Hey, I'm writing, I'm doing an experiment to test like mode collapse and seeing like prompt adherence and all these things." And that's pretty valuable experimentation. I mean, like to go from like kind of where you're at and like just like some like just play around testing to actually like, hey, I'm gonna write a cool blog post that would blow up. I mean, like think about it. And you talk about, hey, like I ran 100 different prompts with these base prompts, and I made X number of edits, and over X number of edits, it started to like no longer adhere to like the
Right.
number of edits. Because you could have like a judge looking, because maybe I don't know like how you would actually like do the experiment and hold everything constant, but like it would be a pretty interesting thing to read about for anybody in the industry. Like, hey, Nano Banana is great. Here's where it's falling short. Here's what I experimented with. Writing that up and actually like publishing it would be pretty cool. I mean, that'd be sick.
Yeah, I should do a better job at content writing. Again, comes back to
It,
this
it,
cursor rules, Maybe I just need to automate that.
Because think about it. I mean, you're playing around with this stuff, and you have a lot of knowledge. That could be literally just like Olivia, like the A16Z twins, or somebody be like, "Hey, like
Yeah,
that's really interesting. Like, you like, did you find that there's
yeah,
certain domains, like was
yeah,
it facial
yeah.
expressions that started, like,
You know, I wonder if that's like a good computer use because people think of computer use assistant like, more like a active thing where you ask the assistant to organize your folder or write an email. But I actually think a really cool unlock is a passive use case where you basically have an eyes and ears seeing what you're doing the whole day, which could be great for like your own diary. Like what did I do August 24th, whatever, right? And
right,
it reads it back to you. But also like, like it just crafts an email or content. Hey, I saw you coded up this app and stuff, here's a LinkedIn post, about it, you want to share or something.
right.
It's almost like having an executive assistant, like, just like watching you, the whole day.
I mean, that was the whole. Do you remember about a year ago, Microsoft rolled out the recall feature
Oh yeah,
in
yeah. And
the Surface
they recall the recall, right?
Yeah. It was for anybody that didn't know what this was, I think it was like a year ago now. Essentially, what was happening was Microsoft released this feature or announced this feature that Surface laptops, maybe across Windows, I don't know, you could turn on this feature where an AI would watch what you're doing 24/7, and then you can go like back in time and kind of have like context around like you and using your computer the whole time. And there's a lot of outrage. You could turn it off too, but it's like people like, I don't want Microsoft spying on my personal laptop 24/7. I think it was literally like taking a screenshot every second or something, storing
Mm,
it, processing it, and then like being able to go and just like understand what you're doing. So it's a very promising thing. I think it's just a little too early. I think it probably will come. There's always going to be a trade-off between user convenience and features and privacy.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
I mean, it's fascinating. I
very
think, I mean, we'll have it. I think Microsoft, same with like, what was that, Sydney or whatever. They always like suffer bad because they are a big company and they try to do something and people like freak out. But then somebody else does the exact same thing like a couple of years later or they're smaller and it's like nobody cares.
right. And that's
So
like the
it's very fun.
innovator's dilemma, like at
Yeah.
its core, it's like you're so big, you
Mm,
have to be very careful about your existing customers and the guarantees and expectations they have,
yeah.
especially when you're like publicly traded.
Right.
But it's like, but when you're a small startup, you have nothing to lose. Like I could just eat away at their customer base or just do
Right.
these things that a big company can't do,
Yeah, it's so cool though. But I haven't tried a lot of the computer use stuff right now because it's just so early and buggy, and I'd rather not be a first adopter there. But I do think it's cool technology. I'm curious about like what do you think about the way they do it? Which for me, it doesn't make sense that we screenshot or we try to recreate. I think it's like a what do you call it? A midway thing where we're trying to take the AI is trying to go and try to look at it from your eyes versus I'm like you have a way richer representation inside the computer. It's like a bunch of commands and stuff. So you should be able to whatever I don't know what it looks like under the kernel, but whatever that binary representation or coded representation of the map of your OS is, isn't that way better to just have direct access to that versus trying to come out taking a screenshot and then looking at that? I feel like that's kind of a hacky way of doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like you dig into a lot of stuff here on the OS level where you have like the way an operating system works is there's people much smarter than me. I remember I took an OS class in undergrad and my professor was like, "You guys, this is going to be probably one of the hardest classes you're going to take, and it's very unlikely that any of you will ever work on anything on an operating system because it's just so hard and so few people ever go into the OS level." And the amount of like engineering work that goes into
Right.
making
Yeah.
sure that one program can't have access to the other program's memory. Every single layer of that stack has been
Right.
so well thought through, and just like engineered so well where it's just mind blowing. So
Right.
to have like to install a program that actually lives at like the whatever level at the hypervisor or something where you actually can access the virtual memory of applications and like see what it's just, I think honestly, I feel like it's just way easier just to lay something on top of the screen, already inherit all the permissioning that goes on underneath,
Interesting.
from the OS level, and just be like, hey, whatever the user sees, the AI can be able to see also, but don't give it the ability to kind of circumnavigate all these like security controls of like what's actually going on under the hood. And so just layer another thing on top is like
Hmm.
build upon all the abstractions.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I mean, that's why I think a lot of these like the OpenAIs, and the Anthropics of the world, like they start with the application layer because that's what they have access to. It's as much of a technical challenge as a permissions challenge because they don't have access to a Mac or
Right.
at that level or
Right.
Windows. Which is why I've always, and maybe it's like me being too bullish on incumbents, but I do think this is where Microsoft and Apple should just, because they have the developer, they have people who understand that OS level abstraction and they have access to it, so they should be able to build something that's
Yeah. Yeah.
deeply embedded that should be way
Absolutely.
better in theory versus anything that you slap on top because they have access to the cake and not just the frosting, right? So
Absolutely. I
you
mean,
think,
it blows my mind how to see that, like, I hope Apple gets their act together, you
oh
know?
yeah, they are struggling. They just, I think they, what did they do? They had a partnership that announced with Google, I think, that they're going
Right.
to use Gemini for Siri because they just threw in the towel.
They did throw in the towel? Oh, wow.
I think so. They have to because the pressure's now happening up. It's been 1 year since that fake demo did last year.
Right. Yeah, Steve Jobs, I think that, like, Tim Cook has done a great job for Apple, you know? After Steve Jobs, it was a huge shoes to fill, and I think, Apple being I think it's still the most valuable company. I think they have the most cash out of anyone,
Right.
but it's the tried and true story of this, failing to innovate, and they have opportunity to redeem themselves. They have a huge market
Yeah.
share of hardware. They've been always privacy focused, but I remember, like, when Meta was hiring all these OpenAI researchers and everyone, like, these talent wars that we talked about last week, the way that Apple's culture has been built, it would have been very, like, they can't compete in that same talent war because it would have, like, you wouldn't want a manager having a lower salary than, like, the person, like, the direct report. And,
Right.
like, this weird, like, org structure is like, hey, why does John make like $5 million more than I do? Like, I only get paid $1 million, and like he gets paid six, and it's like crazy. And so, yeah, I don't know, but
Yeah,
yeah,
it's like Tim Cook again. It's like I mean, he's done a phenomenal job. He's an operations guy. Like Apple's value, I think, has tripled since 2011 since he took over. So I mean, amazing job for
totally.
shareholders. But at the same time, the products just, I mean, they haven't really innovated. I mean, they maybe since the AirPods, you can say it's like it reminds me of the when Steve Jobs was first kicked out. He left out for 10 years. He came back in 97, 98, and he went up and he took all the Apple's products and he goes and he has an all hands and all the Apple employees are there, like the top employees and the engineers. And he's like, "What's wrong with us?" And they go, "Oh, technically, we don't have enough, RAM as Microsoft Windows is kicking us as we have the software." Blah, blah, blah. He's like, "No, no, no." At the end, he just looks at it and says, "There's no sex in the products."
Right.
That was his thing. There's no sex. So that's his very Steve Jobs way of saying like Apple just needs a little more oomph in their products. They've lost that.
It's
so,
so true. It's
so
so true. It's like it's the intangible. It's the hard things, and I mean, like, yeah, it's. I completely agree. It's the taste. It's the arts. It's the beauty in things. As a society, I think we've gotten so far away from, like, working on these hard things. I think, like, the SaaS era of technology from, like, 2008 to today, like, the last 20-ish years, 15 years, has been easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it is easy.
mm,
But it's like, think we're moving away back towards an era where it's like, you can't expect, like, your products need to be tasteful, be beautiful, especially when the cost of software is going down. Like, you have AI agents working for you, helping you code, bringing the cost of coding down, cost of producing software. And so what differentiates yourself? It's the ability to really think through and understand your users and building a product that feels good. And that's a feeling, and it's not a science. And I think that's what Apple did very well. It's like the feeling when somebody used that Apple II and they're like, wow, this is, like, actually a fun experience. It's no longer something, a corporate black box, but it's, like, fun, and I can actually see myself using it and adopting, computers into my daily life. And so
right,
I think that, where if you want to succeed in the software realm, you have to go towards that. But there's also a new opportunity of hardware, like these hard problems again. And I think that we're going to see it with robotics, we're going to see it with drug and bio and chemistry and physics, and we're going to see, like, hard stuff where it's going to be like, that's going to be sick. Like, that's going to be like, we're going to see, like, you can't be in the middle anymore.
right,
And
yeah.
I saw
No,
some
it's funny
demos.
you say that because we see that divergence happening with these super technical, like, like basically almost as close to the hardware GPU,
Right.
like products on one hand. On the other hand, you see people just like starts leaning on distribution and shock value. And, the Chloe guys kind of were a great example. Most recently, I don't know if you saw last week, there was a viral post about some girl who was like doing kickboxing and stuff and she raised like
Yeah.
$2 million and Park Era something.
Yes.
And I read it twice, like her post about and I have no idea what the startup does. Like zero
Right.
idea what the startup does. Yeah,
Right.
it was a word salad. But like, that's gonna, at least in the short term, that's probably gonna get her attention, which is what she wanted. And maybe it'll lead to some success. But I think that's a way more fragile way of doing it, unless you are a beast like the Cooley guy
Totally.
who'll probably like, be successful despite what people say, because that's just like,
Right.
he's like a unicorn when it comes to distribution and advertising. But for most people, I feel like that's a more fragile way of trying to build a castle versus
Totally.
just
I
going deep down into the technical of a product and building something really good.
It's really interesting you bring this because we've talked about this in the past about like 15 every the future is like everybody gets 15 minutes of fame or something.
Right.
And I do believe like the Arcare girl, it was interesting. Like, yeah, word salads. I have no idea what she talked about. She was just she was boxing and talking. And then the Cluey guys raising 15 from A16Z. I think you'll look back at this period of time where it's like everyone's like, oh, distribution, distribution. Distribution's important. But I feel like the scale at which content is going to be produced and like commanding attention isn't a defensible thing. And I think it's going to be much, much easier. And I think at the foundations of building a good product that is like solving a core problem, distribution doesn't solve that. If you can be viral and raise a bunch of money, and which is good. Like I like to see investment in that area because I mean, maybe the money adds fuel to their ability to hire people and like work on cool stuff. I don't really think so. I do strongly believe that to have a world-class company that becomes a unicorn, which if you're raising venture capital, that's the expectation. You're going to sell your company to be a unicorn and you're raising $15
Right.
million. It's going to come in billion dollars. The founding team has to be cracked. Like they have to demand respect from everybody underneath them. Like you couldn't, like Apple or Microsoft would have never succeeded. Amazon, like any big company, if the founding team was not like, these are these smartest people or like you respect them, like you look up to like those types of people, there's no cultural like strength there because like, oh, the CEO is just like he like messes around and he fucks around and it's just like I don't respect him really. Just like what does he do besides he started the thing? I always think that's
Right.
really like what's their unique strategy. And I think it's just very important to build a world-class business, which you're expected to do when you're raising VC. That's
Right.
my
Yeah.
two cents. So
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so cool, cool, cool. I mean, we talked about a lot of random stuff today. It's
Yeah.
kind of funny. Oh
Yeah,
wow.
I mean, I feel like this was a quote unquote slower week in terms of
Totally.
releases and stuff. We didn't have a lot of releases. We hadn't obviously, we talked about Nano and Nano last week as well. This week, I feel like, I think one thing I did want to talk about, which I think is super interesting, is a Hunyuan. Hunyuan, I always have to see how it's spelled again. Hunyuan Voyager. And basically, we talked about Genie 3, I think a couple of weeks back. And Hunyuan, this is what happens, right? Like you put out something, Google puts out something, or OpenAI, and it's like amazing, but it's closed source, and then the
Right.
open source world catches up, and it sounds like they did this with it's basically Genie 3, but a 3D world, and it's I don't know if they've released the model or they will eventually, because Hunyuan usually does. They're basically the lab under Tencent, and it looks pretty sick, and I feel like
So
this
cool.
paradigm of, I think I saw Justin Moore's tweet about this, which was very interesting. It's like, she said, I can't get over the fact that a stranger can create a world and I can just play around with it. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's almost like the new meme. Like, when you share a photo or something, people laugh, engage. What if the new meme template is like you create like a house or whatever, and then I can go play with it. I can just kind of transport myself inside it, for like a minute or two or whatever. I'm like, oh, what did Pearson create here, right? So
Totally.
that was just a very fascinating like thought bubble. I was like, oh wow, that's a very cool way of interacting that we haven't really explored.
It's so cool. I mean, I can't explain to you how excited and how how sick I think world models are for that exact reason. I
Right.
mean, I loved video games as a kid. I loved being able to enter these cool worlds that were futuristic and explore them, like Skyrim. one of my favorite games. Is open world. You're thrown back in the medieval ages, like fantasy, dragons and swords, and that was so awesome. Or the future where you have like Portal and that game and all these like amazing games and things. It's like what were awesome about the games was like the world that you were in and you kind of
Right.
immerse yourself in that alternate reality and play around. And I mean, it's just so cool, just like purely from like the fun aspect. There's so
Right.
many applications. We talked about that last week with Genie 3 from like a real physics and bringing it into the real world. But just to be able to walk around this like world and like, hey, I want a house
Yeah.
here, put a house here, put a robot here, put
It's so
like this
cool.
weird thing on the sign and build your video game world.
Yeah, and it sounds gonna sound a little cringe, but have had the unfortunate experience of being in the Web3 world, but I can totally see this being the new NFT, where instead of like a Charizard
Image.
card, like a digital like JPEG, you have worlds and stuff. Like somebody builds
Mm,
basically the next
interesting.
OpenSea or whatever. Well, OpenSea is a platform, but like there used to be yeah, Axie Infinity was like this game where people like would play and get tokens and whatever. Play to earn was this whole model that ultimately collapsed, and as it should have, didn't make any sense. It was basically a Ponzi. I feel like this could be a very interesting paradigm we might see in the next crypto bull run, where people have these like create these little. Maybe you have like almost a game engine that lets you easily create these 3D worlds and stuff, using prompts or whatever, and then you can share them, trade them, etc. So I can see that like being a thing, at least for a hot minute.
Why do you think the NFTs or like that is the right sort of distribution? Like why
Yeah. Oh, it's
decentralized?
like just to clarify, I don't mean like there's any utility or it's right. I just
Right.
think it'll be just one of those viral things that people
Oh,
will try to make a
interesting.
buck off. So I can just see it becoming a thing. In terms of like it being useful, I mean, it's more useful and unique than I feel like having a JPEG off a rock. I feel like at least, so that's why I feel like at least you can say, oh, I created this world and stuff, so maybe it's got some value because I spent some time creating this amazing castle, and you can explore and stuff, etc.
Right. No,
So.
it's super cool.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder. I always think crypto is interesting, but I've never really seen the utility on why the decentralized. I mean, I get it kind of, but like why is it better than having a centralized entity? Like if you just had Hunyuan host all these worlds and you just have like a username is like, oh cool, it's mine. Like
Right.
versus being on the blockchain and
Right.
saying, "Oh,
The
this is mine."
decentralization aspect has always been very, I do like one idea I liked about the whole Axie Infinity and these blockchain games was that you could have a platform where it's all interchangeable. So let's say I create a world with like, it's a medieval world of knights. And so we have swords and shields and stuff. And then you create a sci-fi world of Star Wars type. You have laser beams and stuff. So let's say I want to go into your world.
Hmm.
I have these assets. I have a shield. I have a sword. Uh, Obviously, it doesn't make sense for me to go with the shield and sword in your world. But maybe if we use the same underlying technology, a blockchain and stuff, the promise was I could trade in my sword for your lightsaber for a certain value change, right? We can come up with something, and because of the same currency, we can do that because it's all like standardized.
Hmm.
I'll caveat this was the promise. Now I don't know why something like an Unreal Engine can't come up with that. I think the idea was like they, you know, or a Fortnite can't do that. I think that's one of the reasons Fortnite works is because it's basically a huge super world where people can do this, right? So that's like the argument. I'm
Hmm.
not saying I buy it, but I do like the idea of interchangeability. I think in this world where, because nobody wants to just, I mean, I don't think anyone is just going to create their own world. Most people don't want to just create their own isolated island world. I mean, that's cool for a hot minute, but
Right.
what's really cool is when you can interact with it. So I think having this interchangeability will be cool where, somebody creates a Barbie land, somebody creates Star Wars land, someone creates something else, and then you can share and you can portal in and out from one world to the other, right?
Right.
So
Single player though, which is interesting because I mean,
yeah,
like in this sense, like you're going into the world, and then
well,
if
it
the
doesn't have to be
decentralized,
single player. I feel like it can be multiplayer. You can like meet other people
it
as
could
their.
be,
You
but
can
then
have
then you have to
you
go
go to
into
a
the
tavern and
centralization.
have a beer, with a bunch of
No,
people.
for sure. I think that's like awesome. I'm just like thinking about it from like, okay, challenging the decentralization aspect because then if you're doing multiplayer, you need to have some sort of synchronization of, I mean, my state and your state. And so there has to be either like a server or a peer-to-peer network, which is just like, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. Maybe Yeah, it's cool. I'm so excited for these though, these worlds and everything. I have like all these thoughts spinning in the back of my head about like, how to structure this, make it keep it consistent. I'm gonna read this paper, or at least just like dig into this a little bit more because I want to see if I can actually play with it and if it even has a demo that I can mess
Yeah,
with. Does
maybe
it
the
have a
Hugging
demo?
Face
Yeah.
space has maybe the Hugging Face space has a demo. I don't know if they let you interact with it or you just have I just saw the videos, but very cool. I think we soon will be able to generate like these worlds and stuff because they are basically real time and it's yeah, it's very cool. What you can do. I was listening to an AI podcast about some of the people who made Genie from Google who made Genie 3, and what was one thing was fascinating was they knew they were going to make it as far as back as Genie 2 because they realized Genie the difference between Genie 2 and 3 was just scale
Mm,
because they basically there wasn't any breakthrough. They were so they figured this out a while back and they were like we just need to throw more computer at this point
right.
and there were a bunch of interesting mini challenges they solved as well but they already have a very good path on Genie 4 and maybe even beyond about how
Right.
this is gonna look, how it's gonna get better.
Totally.
So very
Totally.
bullish on this.
There's also another research thing. Like if I was on this team, there's an alternate reality where I was like, I would like research, and it'd be sick. I never liked research like ever until the last few years. But
Right.
we talked about this when we were talking about Genie 3. I'm just looking at these videos on the back. Like I clicked on the link that we'll put in the show notes about Voyager and the world model. And I just think it's such an interesting. There's so much to do in this. Like, how do you represent the world and keep it consistent over time? And how do you allow for iterations? Like, this is a theme that we've always talked about. Like, how important to
Mhm.
be able to generate something and then to iterate on it. And how do you represent iterations in a world model? And we have all these building blocks like that LLMs understand, and these AI world models understand. You have text, they understand text, and they can convert text to image. They have image, they can convert image to worlds or image to video. And you can kind
Right.
of do vice versa too, image to text. Like, hey, what does this image look like? And when you're entering a world model, I just really think that there's going to be an approach where you generate a world model and you walk around that world, you interact with that world, and then you see, like, let's say you see I don't know, a house on the left hand side where it's like, I want that house to have a different style door. And
Mm.
you're looking at that house with a different door. And then you type on your keyboard, make this door from silver to gold. And now that door is gold. And how do you represent that to keep that consistent over time?
Mm.
And so maybe what happens is that, like, you take that prompt, you regenerate that one area, you take like a screenshot, like a theoretical screenshot, maybe even a real screenshot, and you pinpoint it there. And so, like, when you go back into that world, it kind of like regenerates the world with more context about that one area. And so then you kind of like always have that as metadata. Like when you regenerate this world, you had the world and all the weights of that world, but then you also like had the little LoRa that applied this change on top for that one
Mm.
area. And then you can continue to do that. So it's like when we're exchanging worlds, like what's going to make my world better than yours? Because if we just both generate a world with just a prompt, it's like there's non-determinism for sure that if we both put the same prompt in, we'll get different things. But
Right.
like you can still prompt to the same thing. But if I built a world that had an initial prompt and then I went to this door, I'm like, hey, make that door different. Go over there, make that skyscraper in the distance taller. And then like I've spent a lot of time building my world and I actually can store that and save that. Like that's, I think, what could be really powerful too, because I spent a lot of time to refine and get to this perfect place beyond just like an initial prompt to world or
Right.
image to world.
For sure. And then you can sell it for $1 million to someone on OpenSea. Or you can like, people can come and explore it. I think that's like it's like that movie Wreck-It Ralph. I don't know if you
Yeah,
ever
I've
watched
heard
it,
of. Yeah,
but
yeah.
like I love the concept like because you have this arcade, right? And you have these characters. So there's completely isolated worlds, but they're able to go to a completely different graphic, sometimes a
Totally.
very different graphic looking
Yeah,
world, and they can still co-interact with the people. And I found that very fascinating. I'm like, that would be very cool, right? Maybe you have a Minesweeper like graphics, and then you have a really nice high definition person coming in there. With
oh,
the
totally.
generation, you can do that.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. Well, wild. Wild. Well, I mean, it's funny. We go into the episode. We have like a few bullets, and even this morning for everybody in listening. It's like we were like, oh, we don't even know what we're going to talk about. Here's some bullets, and then we have all these things that we're like we didn't even get to, and so now we'll get to it next week. But it's great. I love it.
Yeah, same. Always fun.
Always fun. Well, episode 12.
Well,
Wrapped up.
episode 12. All right. One dozen.
One dozen. Yeah. Teens next time. Yeah.
Yeah. Finally.
Sweet. Okay. Take
All
care.
right. Bye.